I'd like to call the meeting back to order. We did call the meeting a little earlier to enter into executive session, so it's now 6:15. This is the Tuesday, April 21st meeting of the Brattleboro Selectboard, and I will just reconfirm with Peter that the meeting has been properly warned.
Yes, it has.
Thank you. And at this time, I would like to take a motion to approve the minutes of both April 2nd and April 7th.
I move to approve the minutes of April, whatever, whatever.
April 2nd and
and-
April. Okay,
and 7th?
The 2nd and the 7th.
Yes.
Does anybody have any comments or any corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, I will ask all those in favor to say aye.
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 That's 5-0 for the approval of the minutes. Next on our agenda tonight is the chair's remarks. We're still getting on our feet here with how to run things, and I feel the same way. I'm still feeling a little disoriented as to how things are going. There were a couple of things I wanted to say as chair, which I felt like just to say a couple things to kick things off as chair now. I wanted to say a couple things that are just sort of in general. They don't really relate to our present situation, but in a way they do. I wanted to say that we come together as always here at the Select Board to do the business of the town of Brattleboro and to serve its taxpayers and its residents the best way we can. And to that end, we ask that any public comment or question be limited to 2 minutes so that the board can spend the bulk of this meeting time on town business. And please remember that our responses to any questions about unwarned subjects must be limited in our responses in accordance to open meeting law. I'd like to say that, in my opinion, our guiding principle should always be to remember that the needs of the many here in Brattleboro outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And be assured that all of your select board members hear your concerns and that we strive to meet your needs while always remembering that we are charged with considering all of our residents in our deliberations. And then finally, just sort of more pressing to the current situation is we got an email. Jan Anderson is the executive secretary, and I just confessed that I miss interacting with Jan a little bit, and because she's always sort of a glue that keeps the select board together and communicating with Peter Elwell, our town manager, and so many of our community members. She sent out an email that was just very helpful, had all of our documents together recently. But in that email, sometimes you get a little dose of wisdom from Jan, and she had one line that struck me, and I wanted to share that. She just casually said in the middle of the email that, again, shared all these documents that we needed. She said, as these unusual times persist, so do we. And I just really loved that little phrase that Jan gave us. And I wanted to take this opportunity to thank Jan and Patrick and Peter and our entire staff here in Brattleboro. I personally feel honored to work with and for everybody here in Brattleboro, Vermont. So those are my chair's remarks. And I'm going to pass it over to our town manager for his comments.
Thank you, Tim. I have 4 actually on topics other than COVID-19 this evening. So I'm happy to offer some good news and some information and things that are sort of more generally about town business and looking ahead to the future. So the first is the tremendous good news that we've been waiting for, but honestly thought might not come, at least in this timely manner, because of the interruption of normal business by COVID. But we had an application pending with the Vermont Community Development Program for some additional funding for the groundworks project. It is the final piece needed in over $3 million of funding to make that project, go. And we learned this morning that VCDP is making an enhancement grant of $50,000 to the groundwork shelter construction project to be built on South Main Street. It's in addition to a $400,000 grant previously made by VCDP to this project. And it's the final piece in a complex funding puzzle that includes federal funding, state funding, town funding, private foundation funding, and over $1 million of donations from individuals and businesses that are in our community and outside our community supporting this project. Groundworks leadership has assured me that the construction now is able to begin just as soon as the COVID-19 restrictions allow that kind of construction activity to resume in the community. So that project will move ahead. We've also been advised that Dan Adams, who is our tree warden here in Brattleboro, has been chosen for a prestigious award. The Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Program will recognize him as this year's Hamilton Award winner. That Hamilton Award is named after a long-standing tree warden and a leader in maintenance of urban forestry in Vermont. This award is presented to a tree warden who has significantly advanced the goals of urban and community forestry through successful practices, effective conservation planning, increased citizen engagement, and active public education. Dan graduated from the University of Maine with a degree in forestry and has been the tree warden here in Brattleboro for over 20 years. He helped establish our tree advisory board, which actively promotes our urban and community forestry programs in Brattleboro. And under his leadership, the tree board meets once a month, promotes public education, tree planting, tree maintenance, grant writing, tree inventories, and the review of town projects. We thank Dan for his long and dedicated service, and we thank Steve Barrett for nominating Dan to receive this well-deserved honor. And two announcements to just remind folks of things we have already announced to the public, but these are big seasonal matters that we want to make sure people are remaining aware of. So the semi-annual flushing of the water mains will start on Thursday evening this week and continue until May 11th. It's essential maintenance to keep the water supply safe, and so we're proceeding with this. We can do it in a manner that the crews go out at a time of night when they're not interacting with other folks in the community, and they can stay safe with each other and perform this really essential maintenance for the safety of our water system. So thanks to DPW for keeping that moving forward as usual. And because the collection of the solid waste curbside program is continuing as one of the essential services that has been continuous throughout the COVID situation, Triple T will be providing the spring leaf pickup, has already done the first of the 2 days of spring leaf pickup. And we just want to remind everybody who may need put out more leaves that Friday, May 1st, a week from this coming Friday, is the one remaining day for this spring pickup that that service will be provided. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Peter. Congratulations, Dan. And really great to hear about the Vermont Community Development Program grant. The Groundworks is certainly deserving. So the next item on our agenda is Select Board comments and committee reports. So I'm going to open it up, and I have a hand up already from Brandy.
Hi. So I want to just remind us about something that's not Brattleboro specific. It's statewide, but we are in the state. And that is, I want to make a reference to the governor's executive order from Friday, April 17th, and to guidance issued under that from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. This is all really easily found online with a simple Google search. And it reminds employees and employers that as of Monday, which is yesterday, employees must wear non-medical cloth face coverings or bandanas over their mouths and noses. And so this is no longer just a recommendation, it's now a requirement. And I want to make sure to clear that up because I know that when executive orders come out, We often read them just through the news. We don't always read the actual guidance or the actual addendums to the orders. And so I want to make it clear to anybody who might be confused that if you're operating a retail business, you need to be wearing something over your face and mouth. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandy.
Thank you, Liz, for complying. I appreciate that.
Does anybody else have comments or committee reports? No? All right. Seeing none, I'd like to move into public participation. Now, I have a little bit of last time I sort of forgot to speak to this a little bit, so let me kind of go over how to participate in our meetings. We are asking that all members of the public and any presenting guests to turn off their cameras and mute their microphones upon entering the meeting room. Obviously, if you're already in, you won't have to worry about that. But if you're going to ask for a question or offer a comment, please type your name into the chat box, or at least just say your name will appear anyway to me, but I'm keeping my eye on the chat box. But please don't actually ask the question if you can hold off on that. What happens is, exactly, Daniel has just typed in left this. Thank you. It puts me in a weird position if last meeting some people were private messaging me a question, and so it was unclear to me whether they wanted to ask me the question and sort of stay private or not. But according to open meeting laws, we really want you to be on camera if possible, or at least on audio to ask your question. That way there's no confusion as to who's asking what and who's commenting about what, because unfortunately, or fortunately, probably, the chat box is not recorded like the video is. So that does not become public record. So that's something that a lot of boards, I think, are struggling with. And the way we have decided to do it is to just raise your hand by saying that you'd like to make a comment or a question in the chat box. I will see it. I'll put you in my little queue, and I will, sort of go through it one at a time. Now, if you're on the phone, let me see notes here. If you're calling, what I'm going to do is at the end of the people who are actually participating via video and computer, I'm going to ask Patrick, our assistant town manager, to open the phone lines like they used to say in the radio days, to just open up the microphones of people who are on the phone in case that they want to say something. But again, please, if you have access to the chat box, go ahead and do that. So hopefully that's clear and reinforces what we've already said.
Tim?
Does anybody have anything to add on that?
I just wanted to let you know that Patrick has texted to me that we do not at this moment have any callers. He'll let us know if we get a caller later in the meeting, but as of right now, we only have online participants.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I do, I sort of like scan through it once in a while to see if I see that little call symbol,
Okay.
and it is discouraged to call, but of course we're trying to get access to everybody who can possibly participate in any way during this strange time. So I do not see anybody who has sort of raised their hand in the chat section. Here's your last chance, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll be moving on to item number 7, excuse me, COVID-19 update, which will be led by Peter.
Thank you. And I'd like to just add to one more clarification to what you just said, Tim, about how the public participation is functioning before I provide the overall update. And that's just to be really clear about the encouraging people to be online and discouraging people from being on the phone. What we want to make clear to folks is we're saying if you have an option, is participate online, because that's just a more, there are certain challenges to doing this at all in this manner. And those hurdles are lower and easier to clear when we are all participating online. But we recognize that there are people in the community who may not be able to participate online. And so when we say we discourage being on the phone, we want to make really clear that we're not asking people to stay away from the meeting if their only means of participating is on the phone. We want them to participate on the phone. That's why we're allowing phone participation at all. And we're just asking folks who can make a choice to make the choice to be online.
Absolutely.
And speaking more generally to how things are going, I have a few important reminders about health and safety aspects of town government. And then I'm going to give a briefer update. People can breathe a sigh of relief, briefer than I have in the last couple of select board meetings, because there's a lot we've covered in those meetings. There's a lot of information we're pushing out day to day. And so I'm going to focus tonight on just those things that have happened since the last select board meeting 2 weeks ago on April 7th. But first, I just wanted to remind everyone that the police and fire services are being provided 24/7 throughout the community, as they usually are. The procedures have been altered in certain ways that were necessary in order to protect both the police officers and firefighters and the community. So there's some ways in which that service is coming out to folks in the community differently than normal. But we want to provide the overall reassurance that police and fire are available 24/7, and the dispatchers are taking emergency calls 24/7, just as usual. The water and sewer utilities are functioning from the consumer's point of view just exactly as they usually do. If anybody experiences anything unusual, we want to hear about that right away, because at our homes and our businesses, people ought to be receiving water and sewer services just exactly as normal. Again, there are certain procedures that are in place for the safety of the staff, primarily in this case, because they, particularly at the two treatment plants, they don't interact with the public a lot, but the precautions they take to keep each other healthy, keep the system protected, is really important. So those are in place. They have been for weeks now, and those two systems are operating just fine. But we wanted folks to know that we are taking those precautions to protect those systems and the employees who run them. One thing that is an important reminder to people about what you can do for yourself in terms of water safety is in buildings that are not occupied to the same degree as they normally are occupied, it's important to flush the fresh water coming in there, the drinking water that comes in through the taps. So people who enter into a building that has not been occupied for a while should run that water, should run it for several minutes in order to just clear out anything that, any spill water or anything that may have collected in the pipes as a result of the water not flowing as usual. And that flushing process should keep the water safe. The one caveat to that we need to offer is sort of the standard caveat that the town applies or rigorous procedures and complies with rigorous standards for safe public drinking water for the water that is produced at the plant and sent through the pipes and arrives at the meters. On the private side of the meters, where it goes through private piping, whether that's in residences or in commercial settings, those are privately owned systems and the town doesn't maintain them. And so from time to time, we get a question about somebody who's concerned about water in a building. And we can provide lots of information about the safe drinking water that's coming to every building in town. If people are concerned about the quality of water inside a building, then they need to have that privately tested in order to be certain that it's safe for them in that particular setting. And one way to help keep it safe is to do this flushing of the water that's coming into the building. And finally, again, as a matter of making sure that folks have access to communication, there is so much in the way of communication that we're relying more than ever now on digital communications, online communications, and not everybody has that ability to connect to the internet at home. And so we want to make sure that everyone knows that if you need a public Wi-Fi connection, there is one at Brooks Memorial Library. And during this time, when the library is closed, you can access that public Wi-Fi connection by going to the front, to the Main Street entrance of the library. You can access it if you're sitting in a car at the curb at that location, or as long as you're practicing social distancing and staying far enough away from others, there's the planters that you can sit on there, or you can otherwise access that that way into the internet. As far as updates go, I'll try to move quickly through this. Some of this is more important, some of it is more sort of routine, but it's the degree to which circumstances have changed in town during these past 2 weeks. Starting with right after the last select board meeting on Thursday the 9th, we opened Morningside Cemetery for the season. The cemetery is closed for the winter and then opened back up in the spring. And particularly this year, we recognize that that is a place where people get some peace and quiet and some fresh air and exercise in normal years as well, in addition to going in to honor a loved one. And so we wanted to encourage that activity just as we are with the parks, but remind everybody that it's important to adhere to all the advice from the public health experts about how to wear the mask and otherwise stay far enough away and practice the social distancing for everybody's sake. But Morningside Cemetery is available for a walk, a peaceful walk if folks want that. We did, as we discussed last time, the town proceeded with the furlough of 3 employees. The parking enforcement unit has been not functioning since the beginning of COVID. And so we had good interaction with those employees. We have made sure that Sally Nix is staying in touch with them and is helping them through the unemployment insurance process. And so those 3 employees are on furlough at this point, and they're the 4th employee in the parking fund whose compensation is paid for by the parking fund, is the fellow who provides maintenance through the general facilities maintenance team, usually, who is right now working and for the foreseeable future working on the parks maintenance team instead. So he's able to move back into a position he had previously fulfilled for the town as part of that parks maintenance team while parking is closed. We also didn't talk about this last time. The board's aware of it, but the public isn't. And I just want to make sure that folks know that we did look at certain other positions, particularly at part-time positions that aren't able to really perform their normal functions during this time, to see if it was appropriate to furlough any additional employees. And what we found was that the employees who might have been appropriate for a furlough, beyond those 3 in parking, each one of them works few enough hours for the town that the cost to the town to have them stay in their regular wage compensation status with us is actually less cost to the taxpayers than the town's share of the unemployment insurance benefit would have been. So we have several employees in a few different departments who might otherwise have been furloughed, but it's actually better for them and better for the taxpayers to just keep them in paid status, and that's what we're doing. And the status of all other employees is essentially the same as we've discussed now several times, where some are busier than ever, some are doing mostly the normal things they would be doing in the office, but they're not much in the office. Some are going in just occasionally for tasks that have to be performed there, but are doing most of their work remotely. And others are not able to be fully doing all the different things that they do in their normal work, but are doing many or most of the things they do normally, and are people we wouldn't be able to furlough because we wouldn't be able to do without the work that they're performing. And so we've been really careful going position by position to make sure that we're both giving consideration to the impact to the employees as well as to the overall town operation. And we feel like that's calibrated. That set of decisions has been made, and has been made in a way that is both, we believe, fair to the employees, and certainly also the best that we could do in terms of containing town costs in this situation. Now, the town cost is something we'll talk about under the financial report later. It's actually pretty interesting and different in this this emergency versus many types of emergencies, because there's many normal types of town expenditures that we're simply not making. right now while things are shut down. And then there's some other costs that we are incurring, but because we're not, for instance, standing up a surge site for hospital overflow or doing something else that's really, sort of a significant expense with lots of extra labor involved in it, but are rather just maintaining continuity of government through this time, we're not really incurring any significant COVID-related expenses, and we're incurring, less than our normal operating expenses. So from that point of view, that's a little odd. It's a silver lining, but we're keeping a close eye on it. But right now, there's no reason for concern financially in terms of COVID impact to town finances. The Brooks Memorial Library staff is providing assistance to folks who need assistance with completing their census forms. So that information is available on the town's website, or you can call Brooks Memorial Library and ask for that assistance. We're happy to help. And it's really important that we get a complete count of everyone who lives in Brattleboro. The Recreation and Parks Department had to cancel their spring youth sports season for obvious reasons, but both Recreation and Parks and the library are finding lots of new and expanded ways to support people with enrichment activities, a variety of enrichment activities for kids and for adults, online primarily, and also in other communications. And so there's a lot of information. Both of them operate a Facebook page in addition to the information that's on the town's website. We'd encourage people to be in touch with them and make sure that they're accessing the services that are available. The police department made the decision this past week to waive any alarm fees until further notice. So that's another one of those items where we recognize, hey, we can do this. We can make things just a little less burdensome to the broader public during this time. And so we've taken that step to waive the alarm fees. And that is the state of the town operations actions. There's a few things that we're doing that are sort of a step outside of basic town operations. But before I go to those, I want to just pause and see if you have any questions or any comments any of you want to offer about what I've said so far. Okay.
I don't. Anyone else? No.
So, so just 4 other points I wanted to make. These again are things that the board is well aware of. In fact, the board is involved in some of these, and in other cases, staff is handling them. But the board is aware. But I want to make sure that the community knows that the town and other communities who administer program income funds are collaborating with the state of Vermont's Agency of Commerce and Community Development to create a statewide small business relief program. ACCD asked the local agencies to collaborate on this so that there would be a simple and consistent process for Vermont's small businesses, and to make it more likely for the program to receive additional state and federal funding in the future. One of the things that's unique to the work we do in Vermont compared to the rest of the country when we're involved in a situation like this one is, where there's national impact or national programs that are applying, is we operate at such a human scale. It's one of the wonderful things about living where we live and being in the community we're in, that our program income fund having a bit over $300,000 available for this effort is an amount of money that federal employees can't really understand in terms of realizing that there's real meaningful impact that comes from the expense of those kinds of funds. They tend to deal with millions, tens of millions, even greater in the programs that they administer. And so sometimes it is better for Vermont communities to be pooled when we're dealing with demonstrating to the federal government the effectiveness of our work and being able to draw additional federal funding, because it comes to a scale where it's serving 650,000 people instead of 12,000, and where the money involved is, in this case, approximately $10 million statewide instead of $300,000. Those are, that's a scale that the federal government can relate better to, and it's one of the reasons why this approach is deemed in everybody's collective better interests instead of each of us doing our own thing. The details of this are not clear yet. We're working on developing that. It'll take a few weeks to put it in place. I expect there'll be at least an update and possibly an action item related to this for the May 5th Select Board meeting. FEMA has released its initial guidance to municipalities and to other agencies who may be eligible for reimbursement of COVID-19 expenses. And for the reason I described a few minutes ago, the town is not likely at this point to be eligible for any reimbursement. It's just not that kind of an emergency. You know, after something like Irene, where there were a lot of overtime hours and a lot of expense related to the restoration of facilities, the town was eligible to receive a lot of reimbursement. In this case, the expenses we've been incurring have been the expenses related to the basic operations of town government. And even though many of those have been very COVID specific in these past 4 to 6 weeks, they aren't outside of, for instance, employees who have been doing work that is nearly or entirely COVID related aren't eligible. Their costs for those employees aren't eligible for reimbursement because they're not working extra hours in order to provide those services. If they had to work extra hours and we were paying COVID related overtime, which we have in a few cases, we track that separately so that if there was enough of that over the entire period of this emergency, we might become eligible to receive some reimbursement. At this point, there's been very little of that kind of overtime and virtually no expenses related to facilities. And so our costs have been basic town operating costs and unreimbursable. We are, as town officials, continuing to communicate frequently with our colleagues around the state, both in municipal governments and in state agencies, so that we keep learning from each other. One of the things also about this emergency, those of us who have dealt with natural disasters and other kinds of emergencies in municipal operations, there's plans and experience that we have that make those sort of more familiar, even though they're thankfully rare. And when they happen, you can mobilize into your emergency management mode and take the set of actions that's appropriate to the occasion. None of us had that as experience or as robust plans related to this scale of a public health emergency. And so we've been learning a lot as we've been going along. And one of the ways in which we're trying to make sure we're all better prepared for a next time, if there is one, is to make sure that we learn from each other. We're not just learning from our own experiences in Brattleboro, but we're also learning from other communities around the state and from state agencies that are involved in this effort. And finally, because there is a variety of different ways in which the Vermont State Legislature is considering emergency action, they've taken some and they're considering more in ways that will impact the recovery period for the broader general public and for businesses, but also specifically related to the continuity of the provision of municipal government services. We are in continuous communication with our local legislative delegation and with other legislators around the actions that they're considering and the ways in which they would positively affect town government or not, to try to help make sure that Brattleboro's particular municipal interests are considered and broad municipal interests across the state are considered as the legislature continues to take emergency actions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to just underline two things that Peter just spoke about. Thanks for all that, Peter, by the way. Which is, there's two major things going on that people may have heard about in the news, and both of which are sort of in such an ongoing gathering information mode, I would call it. The ACCD is a moving target that we're keeping our eye on. It's a possible way to pool resources, as Peter said, and possibly help our local businesses greatly. However, we have to know what it is first, and then we have to move to the time where we will deliberate whether it's the right thing for Brattleboro to do. And similarly, what's going on in the legislature right now with what is possibly going to be available to towns to alter tax payments or to alter fees anything like that. We are a Dillon Rule state. We don't currently have the ability to change any of that. And before we can even deliberate whether that would be a good idea, we need the legislature to decide on that. And VLCT, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, has been very helpful in coordinating some legislation that's moving its way through so that towns do have the option of doing that. But we're a little bit away from being able to decide if that's the right choice for Brattleboro. Anybody keeping their eye on that, I want to make very clear, and I'll be pushing this out however else we can. I think we should be doing this. To be clear that we have a very solid and useful abatement appeal process for taxes. So on an individual basis, there will be opportunities for people to present their case, regardless of what happens with any decisions from the legislature and then from this select board going forward. Hope you don't mind me just kind of throwing that out there and kind of framing that a little bit, Peter, but I think that's important for people to understand that this board is very much aware of these developments, and we just have to wait a little bit to see what kind of abilities we'll have if we choose to take them.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Peter concerning, well, generally COVID-19 developments or that last batch of things that he spoke about? No. Oh, Liz has, go ahead and say that, Liz. I just saw that
what were those initials that you talked about for
the ACCD is the State of Vermont's Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
Thank you.
And you'll see that if you, Brandy mentioned the new guidelines as far as shop owners and stuff with the masks, that actually comes from ACCD via the governor, obviously, but I mean, it goes through that department. So they are the ones that are proposing a pooling of what in our case would be that program income pot of money that we have that traditionally we do direct lending on. So that's what Peter was referring to. It's a Vermont agency that's, I would, it's kind of stepping to the forefront in this situation. Would that be an accurate way to describe it, Peter?
Yeah. Yes, they are the Economic Development Agency and Community Development Agency for the state in normal times. And in addition to addressing business recovery needs, they have become the agency through which state government is defining, which businesses are essential and therefore are continuing to operate in a relatively more normal manner. And where the boundaries are between what activities are okay and what are not okay in the conduct of, business and organizational business, not just commercial free enterprise business, but also the business of government and the business of nonprofit organizations.
Thank you. And Liz, that was a good suggestion to explain that.
Yeah, it just gets to be such an alphabet stew, so.
Absolutely. Daniel.
I just wanted to kind of talk about unemployment, unemployment insurance a little bit. And I guess in some ways, I would imagine if you were somebody that was seeking unemployment insurance, you would have sought some of this information out. But I also know that there's been a great deal of angst in the community, especially from folks who have been waiting on the rollout of the unemployment insurance for self-employed people. And I share that angst as well, because the way in which the Department of Labor has rolled it out and rolled out the information has been kind of haphazard at times, and there has been several false starts with this. On the Vermont Department of Labor's Facebook page, there is a frequently asked questions link that is like updated daily. I cannot find on the Department of Labor's actual website an equivalent document But it's a really helpful, like straightforward place. So if you are a Facebook user or have a family member who is, and you're seeking information about unemployment, particularly like the kind of what to do when you get this thing that went wrong and how to fix that, it's a good place for folks to go. I definitely talked with a number of people in town over the last few days, and gave some pointers on where to look for that information. And I know that they've also been doing little kind of town halls where you can watch a video of somebody explaining how it all is supposed to work. And I believe, like, fingers crossed, touch wood, that tomorrow will be the first day that the I forget the name of the program, the pandemic unemployment will be available. Well, we'll be rolling out officially tomorrow, and claims will be able to be made this week. So
For self-employed people.
for self-employed people, contractors, sole proprietors, and people not traditionally, able to claim unemployment insurance. And so I applaud the workers at the Department of Labor, and I actually applaud the governor a little bit for what he did this weekend. And there's a lot of room for progress, but hopefully people will start to get some relief.
Agreed. Yeah, there's a lot of people waiting. I know that. All right, well, I don't see anybody chiming in on chat, and I also don't believe there's anybody hanging on the phone currently. So I'm going to move on, if that's all right with everybody, to Water and Sewer Commissioners. So I would entertain a motion to convene as Water and Sewer Commissioners.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. So we are now Water and Sewer Commissioners. And I think I would invite Dan Tyler and or Steve Barrett. Perhaps if you're both on, you could both come online. It would be great. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Oh,
Hi, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
hello.
Did you guys fight it out as to who's going to give us a little briefing here concerning Old Guilford Road?
I'll just start off by saying Dan Tyler, he's the Utilities Highway Superintendent, Assistant Director. He's taken on this project. It's been a project that we've been working on for some time. The project was bid out and it came in real high, so we revisited the project and went back and rebid it. And Dan has pretty much sheltered this project from here on out. So from there, he'll take it.
Great. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, so we've got a series of manholes on Old Guilford Road, and they collect all the waste from Algiers Village, the Welcome Center, and Commonwealth Dairy. Everything flows to a pump station on Broad Brook Road, and it's pumped up over the hill to the top of Old Guilford Road, and that's where these 19 manholes begin and run down Old Guilford Road. The concrete on the manholes is deteriorating. Couple factors to that: age. This system was installed in 1998, so they're aging manholes. The concrete manholes traditionally don't hold up as well as some of the old brick manholes. The old bricks were actually harder and resisted the sewer gas better. Additionally, when you have a pump station, you get surges of flow, which tend to generate more sewer gases. And that also has contributed to some of the odor issues we've had on Old Guilford Road. With that, the pump station flow sits in the tank, and the potency of the waste increases, which just contributes to the amount of sewer gas that's there. And then when Commonwealth came online, the flows increased, but their dairy waste, they pre-treat their waste and remove a lot of the really high BOD and TSS material. But the material that we receive from them is still stronger than average household waste. which contributes to the sewer gases. The sewer gases react with the bacteria which builds on the concrete, and it's a chemical reaction that becomes corrosive and deteriorates the concrete. So what we're hoping to do is contract with Green Mountain Pipeline to come in, and they'll clean the manholes, clean all the debris, the loose material, and then they'll put an epoxy lining on there, which is resistant to the sewer gas. It's structural, and it'll seal those manholes up, so it'll help the odor issue as well. As Steve mentioned, we put this out to bid last fall. We received one bid, and the unit cost for that was high. It was $1,528 a vertical foot of manhole. This time we bid it out, and we had 3 bidders, and the low bidder came in at $500 a vertical foot. Because the cost was so high, we put it out with an alternate. We put 5 manholes out with an alternate to do 5 more. And because the price is favorable, we'd like to do all 10, and then we'll do the other 9 hopefully next year if everything works out all right. I think that's what I've got.
Great.
Yeah.
You want to just give us, because Liz properly asked us earlier to explain ACCD. You mentioned BOD, and I think this board, with the possible exception of Ian, has run into that term a couple times. There was BOD, and then there was one other that you mentioned. Can you just give us those definitions real quick?
Basically, what they account for is the strength of the waste. The BOD is the biological oxygen demand. So it's basically how much oxygen is necessary to break down that waste. And the TSS is the total suspended solids in the waste. And when there's high, when that's high, it's a stronger waste, essentially.
Great, okay. TSS was the one I was less familiar with. Anybody have any other questions?
No, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes
Yeah, I've
sense
got
to do
one.
them.
I got a question as well.
Oh,
You go
good.
first.
I think I saw Liz's hand up actually first, but
Oh, no, I was
oh.
thumbs up.
Okay. And then it's Ian, and then Daniel. So
Daniel, quick question. How are you determining which of the manholes are being repaired or upgraded first? Is it just location or by level of degradation or degradation?
They're all pretty similar, so we're more or less starting at one end and working down through. We did evaluate all of them when we put it out to bid, and there wasn't any reason to jump around. We're just going to work right down through the line.
Okay.
Daniel?
So it seemed in the memo that the reason for this is increased load from Commonwealth. Have we talked with Commonwealth about that? Like, is there any possibility that they could partner with us in this project?
I mean, I think we're well aware of what Commonwealth is producing for waste. They pre-treat their waste and take the worst of it out of it, which they haul to the plant and we accept from them. They pay a premium for that. The waste that we accept, they pay normal rates for, but we know what it is, and in all, they pay a lot of money for their utilities. Their sewer bill for the year is about $250,000. And then additionally, that higher strength waste that they bring to us, they spend about $5,000 a month on average to bring that to us. So, I kind of pinned it on Commonwealth, I think, in the memo, but it's kind of the nature of the system too, with the pump station, and It's not all their fault.
May I add something?
Yeah, please.
Thanks. So we actually have had some communication. First of all, Dan's right to put this in a broader perspective, that this isn't Commonwealth's fault, but the waste that comes from Commonwealth does contribute to this condition. And we've had some communication with Commonwealth, and they actually have made a voluntary contribution towards some additional costs for maintenance at the pump station that we've incurred as a result that is more directly linkable to the higher strength base. So, we have an ongoing communication with them specific to their situation. And more broadly, when we have a variety of different issues related to the utility system, both water and sewer, that we're going to be discussing at future select board meetings over the next few months. One of the things that we look forward to addressing with the board is research that we've been doing and some thoughts we have about the town's rate ordinance and some choices that ultimately you will make regarding ways in which that might be modified to address this and other issues about how different users benefit differently and affect the system differently than each other.
Thank you, Peter. Did that do it for the board's questions? If so,
Yes.
I would entertain a motion. I think we do need one.
I'll make a motion. I move to award the Old Guilford Road Manhole Rehabilitation Project to Green Mountain Pipeline LLC in the amount of $22,500 for the base bid and $25,000 for the alternative bid, totaling $47,500 for the entire project.
Thanks, Brandy. Brandy's made a motion to award the Old Guilford Road Manhole Project to Green Mountain Pipeline LLC for the total project price of $47,500. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that looks to be 5-0. Thank you to Daniel and Steve for the work.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would entertain a motion to adjourn as Water and Sewer Commissioners.
So moved.
So moved.
So moved by, it was either Ian or Daniel, I'm not sure.
Daniel.
Daniel.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 5-0 on adjourning as Water and Sewer Commissioners. So next up, we have some unfinished business, and we have an ordinance amendment, and I think I would invite Len Howard to come before us, unless Peter would like to frame it for us while we wait for Len to come up.
While Lenny's coming on, I'll just say he wrote a really good, clear, complete memo in response to a variety of good questions that came up last time. So here's Len now to speak to those details. But you did review this 2 weeks ago. You allowed it to move forward to this evening when it will be a public hearing. In fact, it's appropriate for Lenny speaks, Tim, for you to open the public hearing. But his remarks are part of that as well. But tonight is the second reading of the ordinance and the public hearing on the ordinance. And if you are satisfied with the answers and the further discussion you're going to have this evening and are ready to adopt this ordinance, then it would be appropriate for you to do that tonight. Then there's the 60-day period of the publication of it and the opportunity for the public to speak up about it. And after that 60 days, it would become effective.
Thank you, and thank you for that gentle reminder that I should open a public hearing. Does that require a vote? Please remind me.
No, it does not.
Okay, so we will now open a public hearing for this ordinance amendment. And Len, hi Len. Oh, you're on mute.
Len, you're muted. Oh, there you go.
Good evening.
Go ahead.
I'll answer the questions. I'm not sure how much of the public saw the memo, but some of your questions were how many 1 and 2 family rent units are in Brattleboro, and there are 432 2 units and 55 single units. You inquired about what other towns have the same requirement in Burlington, South Burlington, and Berry City. Have what is exactly like we're putting before you. St. Albans, Putney, and Hartford, they require it, but they only, St. Albans requires an electrician must sign off on the work, as well as pull an electrical permit with the state. Putney's very similar, and Hartford requires a permit, which requires a state electrical inspector to approve the work. I did reach out to Michael DeRosa, the executive director for the Division of Fire and Safety, and he did suggest that we add Vermont licensed journeyman and Vermont licensed electrician. He feels comfortable, and so doesn't the electrical inspectors, that a Vermont licensed journeyman is very capable of wiring a 1- and 2-family residential. And I also did include a photo of the most recent electrical fire in a 1- and 2-family residence that we had in 2018. That's all I have, unless you have further questions.
No.
Tim?
Yeah.
Before we go to questions, may I just make clear for the public that the subject of the ordinance is the modification of Chapter 8, Article 3, Section 8-32 of the town's Code of Ordinances, which specifically to the requirements for performance of electrical maintenance work or repairs at rental properties. And right now, what is being proposed is already required under state statute for 3 and more, for rental properties where there are 3 or more units. And what we're asking is that also apply to rental properties with either just 1 unit or 2 units. And the requirement would be that a Vermont licensed electrician or journeyman perform the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I know that I was the one, Len, who asked the question about the scope of work. And I know that you were kind enough to give me the paragraph from the state code on that. And the way I'm interpreting it, just so everybody knows, I had asked if things like repairing one wire or repairing a what do you call it, a wall unit,
Light switch, or a fixture. That was the word I was trying to come up with. Would require a licensed electrician, and according to the state code, from what you have here, it doesn't look like it. Is that correct? That's correct. Yeah.
Minor things. It says installation or replacement of equipment such as lamps, electric utilization equipment approved for connection to suitable permanently installed receptacles, replacement of fuses, other minor maintenance and repair work such as replacing worn cords and tightening connections on a wiring device do not require a work notice, which would cover things like changing a light bulb and changing out a fixture in a hallway or something like that. That's correct. So I have that right there, then?
Yes. Yep.
Thanks. I just thought that was good to clarify because I saw some chatter out there among some landlords that it was kind of an overreach and overly burdensome to landlords, and I don't think so. That's my personal opinion. And Brandy would like to make a comment.
Thanks for that, Tim, and thanks, Len. As far as I'm concerned, this follows the same vein as our rental inspection program in the sense that it offers some of our more vulnerable community members protections that they don't already have in some sense as being renters versus homeowners. And while I'm sure there probably are landlords that can do more electrically than others, that's not the way that we can govern. We need to govern kind of from the lowest end and make it a blanket. And so I'm very much in favor of us doing this and adding it as an extra protection. And I think it falls in line with what we've already been doing.
Thank you, Brandy. Anyone else want to chime in? Ian?
Yeah, Len, I just wanted to thank you. I was the one who asked for just the actual number of units. And I really found that information very helpful. And just seeing that this would affect over almost 500 buildings, it just so clearly is, I would really encourage the board to vote in favor of this.
Yeah, Liz?
Well, as I said in the last reading, I think our most important duty is health, safety, and welfare. And if you haven't seen that picture, that says it all. And maybe is it on the town website? That
It is.
photograph? Yeah.
Oh,
I'm going to share it out to see.
Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks, Lenny, for the picture that speaks 1,000 words.
And I should say that if you, after seeing the picture, which we'll share around in various ways maybe, if you go downstairs and your panel looks like that, please call an electrician immediately.
Seriously.
Yeah, we laugh, but that's scary looking, and that's from an actual fire in 2008, right?
2018.
2018.
Oh, sorry.
Terrifying.
Yeah, and again, we're protecting people that don't, renters don't have the ability to let things go like that. They are, relying on their landlords to be good landlords and stewards of their own safety. So it was an unfortunate hole that 3 units and above would have to have an electrician, and 2 or 1 do not, and that's just something that we need to correct, in my opinion. So I'll shut up because I'm the chair. Anybody else have any other comments? I don't see any chat, and I assume that if there was anybody on the phone, Peter Patrick would have let us know maybe.
So it would be appropriate, if there isn't any other discussion under this one, to close the public hearing and then take a motion on the ordinance, please.
Okay, yeah, I was just kind of talking it through to kind of stall so that people could have a chance to raise their hand, so to speak. So I will close the public hearing and then accept a motion.
I can make a motion. I move to approve the amendment to Chapter 8 of the Brattleboro Code of Ordinances as presented.
Thank you, Daniel. Daniel has moved to approve the amendment to Chapter 8 of the Brattleboro Code of Ordinances as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And none opposed. That is 5-0. Thank you, Len, for all the work and your team. And thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Len.
Len.
All right, so that does it for unfinished business at this time. So we move into new business, and we have a few things that we're going to let Peter talk again on.
Thank you. So the first is the monthly financial report. I alluded to this during the COVID discussion that the expenditure numbers are good. So after 3/4 of the year, 75% of the year has been completed. Our prorated rate of expenditure in the general fund is at 71.6%, and that rate has reduced since last monthly report. And the reason for that is, again, because our altered operations have actually reduced the cost of daily operations in the general fund. The same is true in the utility fund, not for all the same reasons, but it is true that the rate of expenditure is slightly lower than it was last month, and that 75% of the way through the year, our prorated rate of expenditure is at 70.8% there. So we're in good, solid condition. Of course, over in the parking fund, it's an entirely different circumstance. The revenue there has gone to zero, and so we will, when we in May are dealing with the utility fund budget and the parking fund budget, give a good full report about the status of the parking fund and how that affects decisions you might make about the FY21 budget for the parking fund. But the numbers in the parking fund are not especially relevant for this evening because of the fact that we've closed that operation down for now. In the utilities fund, on the other hand, with the continuing operation, this is good, solid position that we're in from the expenditure side, and the utility payments that are due on May 15th have already begun to arrive, and so we'll see how that comes in. Obviously, in these times, there may be some reduced level of collection compared to usual, and we'll have more to say about that as we get into the middle of May. But on the general fund side as well, there are, of course, a variety of different revenues. We are largely dependent on the property tax, but there are a variety of other revenues that the general fund receives. And staff is in the process of doing a very thorough and careful analysis of both the revenue streams and the expenditure line items so that we can provide to you, most likely actually at the next meeting, rather than waiting until May 19th, when there'll be a monthly financial report again on the agenda, as always. Likely on May 5th, we'll have some additional information that we're going to want to share with you and with the community about the analysis, both for the budget impacts and the cash flow of the town related to COVID-19 impacts, and just looking out into the future. Because even though our expenditures are really stable and nothing abnormal at this time, the revenue streams may be low enough that there's some things there that are worth calling out and some adjustments that we may need to make. So we want you to know that we're in the midst of working on that, and we will have good detailed information at future meetings.
Thank you. Great. Anybody have any questions? I have to say that I'm still trying to get used to the PDF thing, and some of them are sideways. So but you can turn it. I know that you can turn it. I'm old. So I saw a hand up, but I think it was Daniel.
Yeah, I want to thank Peter for what you just said about the analysis of our situation, because at least in my experience on the board thus far, the financial report is something that we go, yes, very good, everything seems fine, and then we move on, or I ask an annoying question about a line item. And looking at the financial report this time, I had a lot of questions about what ifs, and I know that we don't really know the answer to those questions right now. I noticed some of the expenditures were significantly reduced, in particular, facilities where we're not really operating in the same way. It looks like the electric expenditure is down significantly. Mm-hmm. And so I guess in the analysis, I would love to see, where we're seeing, significant drops and what that saves us, and then how that's offset by, losses of revenue and whatnot. And I mean, I guess that's what you'll do. I just wanted to acknowledge that, this is a financial report that gives me pause right now. So fingers crossed.
It should. So first of all, there are no annoying questions about line items. Questions are good. Flesh out sometimes things that we didn't see and should have seen, and then we talk them through and we go and we do more work around that. Other times there's a good, easy, quick explanation to something, but it's important for you and for others to know it. So, so don't ever stop asking questions. And as it relates to the situation that we're in, we've been fortunate that town finances have been, well managed, and our experience has been stable now for such a long time. It hasn't always been true in Brattleboro. It isn't always true everywhere. So, we've been really on a nice, stable run. And this has thrown all of that out of kilter. We're still in solid shape. We're going to have more specific things to say about the ways in which that's true and the ways in which it's less true, and what we should be, doing around all that in the May meetings. But the greatest difference for us at this moment is the uncertainty related to COVID. How long will it last, and will some impacts that we see so far as not being significant start showing up as more significant over time, and for reasons that we maybe can predict when we think it through, or maybe can't even predict right now, because so much of this we couldn't possibly have predicted a couple of months ago. So it's right to pause. It's right to think that this needs more attention than it normally has been getting from us from month to month.
Great, thanks, Peter. Does that do it for comments from board members?
Yes.
Thanks, Liz. I don't see any. I see you're getting more comfortable. That's good. All right, just trying to break it up. The monotony of the Hollywood Squares thing. I don't see any comments or questions from our audience, so I think we can move on to item B, which is the local emergency management plan update from Peter.
Thank you. So Mike Bacassi is in the meeting and can join us if you have detailed questions you want to ask Chief Bacassi. But this item I can summarize by saying it is an annual requirement that we update our local emergency management plan, and that you approve it, and that I sign it, and we send it off to Montpelier. Most years that involves a little bit more of a substantive discussion at this moment in time about what we have updated, changes that we might have made because we've learned something, or changes we've made because we've experienced something this past year. And this year it doesn't have that, and it's pretty ironic to be experiencing this in the middle of COVID, right? So we're learning a tremendous amount about an entirely different kind of emergency, and a year from now that's going to show up in the LEMP update. There was a very active conversation within the emergency management community about whether this deadline for a May 1st readoption ought to be pushed back so that that process could occur this year. The answer is, sadly, that this is a state requirement. In order for the state to comply, we need to comply with this requirement to the state, so the state can comply with updrift requirements the state has to the federal government. And the upshot of all of it is, the failure to check the right box in the annual updating of these plans actually makes places ineligible to receive FEMA reimbursement when a disaster happens. So the decision was made, and I don't judge it. It feels awkward at this moment. But I think it was the necessary decision given the federal rules that apply to this process. The decision was made at the state level that all of us as local governments would need to meet this deadline in the normal manner and send our plans up to them so they can send them off to Washington and keep Vermont communities eligible to receive FEMA reimbursement from, during disaster situations. And so the plan that is before you this evening for approval, first of all, as you know, but I want to make clear for the record and for the public, the plan is always available to the board at this time. It's a thick, detailed plan. And so what's in the backup materials for the public is just a couple of sheets of paper that give a summary and then give the signature page showing, the process that has to be officially done and sent off to Montpelier. But the plan is available for public review or for the select board. And this year it is unchanged from last year. There's just too much going on in the world of emergency management right now to have made any changes to it that would be, appropriate and reasonable under the circumstances. What everyone is doing, virtually everyone is doing, is taking last year's plan and approving it again this year so that we can comply with the requirements for the federal government and know that we're going to do a pretty thorough update, much more even than usual. And this is a plan that actually gets, every page gets attention each year in a normal circumstance to see what might need updating. This year, we know it's going to be substantially updated. There'll be a whole new section added for public health emergencies and other aspects of it, like health change as well. So that's the overview. If you need to take a deeper dive into some particular aspect of the plan, it would be appropriate to ask that of Chief Bukowski.
Thank you, Peter. I'm sorry, I was looking away. Liz, did you raise your hand or?
No, but I'll be happy to make a motion when you're ready.
Anybody have any comments or questions? I think my comment would be philosophical. I mean, I did sit through a LEMP day with you a couple years ago, if I recall, Peter, and I got a nice certificate and everything. But those are all sort of like punctuated emergency, or yeah, just punchy, I guess. Punctuated emergency, events, like fires and active shooter situations and all kinds of horrible things that we prepare for and our fire department and police prepare for all the time on an ongoing basis. But now we're in a situation where we have an emergency, a public health emergency, and we could very well, as we've seen in the Midwest and the South, have emergencies that we understand better on top of our current emergency. So the multi-layer aspect, or at least the ongoing new norm for public health concerns, could be added to very easily with another, active nature. So I don't know. I just think it's sort of interesting to consider the new norm going forward on the LEMP for the next iteration. So now I will, I don't see any comments or questions from the public, so I'll go ahead and take a motion, Liz.
Okay. I move to adopt the 2020 Brattleboro Local Emergency Management Plan and authorize Town Manager Peter Elwell to sign the Local Emergency Management Plan Municipal Adoption Form to certify that the plan meets certain requirements.
Thank you. Liz has made a motion to adopt the 2020 Brattleboro Local Emergency Management Plan, aka the LEMP, and authorize Peter Elwell to sign the Local Emergency Management Plan Municipal Adoption Form to certify the plan meets requirements. All those in favor, say aye.
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 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And we're going to move on now to item C. It's a certification of VTrans road and bridge standards. Peter?
So this one also is an annual requirement. It keeps us eligible to receive substantial funding assistance through the state road maintenance program. And so we have to follow certain, adhere to certain standards in our road maintenance work that are established statewide. And by adhering to those standards and certifying that we do continue to adhere to those standards, we keep ourselves eligible to receive that funding assistance from the state. Here again, just exactly like the last one, if you need any kind of more detailed explanation of how we actually maintain our roads, we have Steve and Dan still both in the meeting and able to come back in and answer those detailed questions. But our ask to you this evening, and well, our assurance is we do continue to comply with all the road and bridge standards, and the standards are unchanged from last year. And so we're asking just that you certify that the town does continue to be in compliance with that.
Great.
Thank you. Does anybody have any more detail or any questions about this action?
No.
If not,
I think Ian's got a question.
oh, sorry.
No?
Did you have?
No, I'm preparing to make the motion.
Okay.
Nice.
Please do.
You saw that inquisitive look on my face.
I did. Know it well.
Go right ahead.
Oh, great. All right. I move to approve the annual certification of compliance with town, road, and bridge standards as presented.
Thank you. Ian has moved to approve the annual certification of compliance with town, road, and bridge standards as presented. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thanks, by the way, for the raising of the hand too. It kind of helps that I make sure that I'm not going to
I was
get it.
raising my hand before, but I couldn't figure out how to get it in the screen.
Oh, right.
So I've been raising it way over here. This is not
Yeah.
right.
Okay, so moving through it.
That's funny, Daniel.
Nice.
I didn't see that. Did you do the hand?
Foolishness.
Doing hand things.
You know, life is hard right now.
Good to have laughs.
Yeah.
Try to do a wave, but I've never figured out if we all have the same grid layout as each other.
Oh, yeah.
No, because it seems to be different on different devices.
We can work that out in executive session next time.
I don't think that's an appropriate topic.
No. God.
Our last, I believe, item in new business tonight is appointments for Brooks Memorial Library Board of Trustees.
Woo.
Yeah.
So you have a memorandum from Star, and Star is on the line if you'd like to hear from her. The short summary of this is that there are 2 seats vacant on the Brooks Memorial Library Board of Trustees. And just as the select board was able to go through a relatively normal, timely transition, where some of the details were different because of our unusual circumstances this year, but through Dave Skoll's resignation and Ian being sworn in, you were able to move on into the sort of the new select board year, even though an official transition will occur after town meeting. Likewise, the Library Board of Trustees would like to have the opportunity to fill these seats and move forward with its work with a full complement of members. And so has asked that the select board follow the procedure, even though at this time of year, normally what would have happened is the town meeting would have elected the new members of the Library Board of Trustees, and they would have been seated in the reorganization for the year. Instead, we're following the procedure for the filling of vacancies, which is a straightforward appointment by the select board without any confirmation at this time. And then when town meeting can be held, this question will be put before town meeting for the formal election of library trustee members or trustees. So the particular proposals from the library trustees, the request is that you appoint Karen Tyler, serve a 3-year term that is vacant, and Gabriel Sestar to complete the final year of an incomplete term. And if someone knows Gabriel, I'm sorry I don't. If I've just butchered Gabriel's last name, I apologize.
Yeah, actually, I was going to exercise our select board power and ask Star to come on just so we didn't mispronounce that last name.
I should have deferred.
I just always like talking to Star anyway.
Yeah, really.
Are you able to magically
And there
make
she is now.
I think so.
Aha.
Hi, Star.
Hey, thank you so much for inviting me in, because it gives me the chance to say Happy National Library Week. Thank you.
Hi, Star.
Yay.
And also today is National Library Workers Day. So it couldn't be more appropriate, because our trustees worked so hard for the library and they don't get paid. So this is a great way to honor them. So I thank you. And it's Gabriel Sestare.
All right.
Yeah.
Star?
Yeah.
A book from the library, relevant
trying to
to
read
our
it.
work. Is it back to front? Anyway, I'm sorry. I got excited about books. I was like, oh, this book's important.
Where did you get a
I like
book?
seeing the books in the background of Liz's frame, I have to say. I'm just watching everybody, so.
I got books.
I know you all have books.
Also, Star, that's not a pipe, just so you know.
Thank you. But can you say it in French?
Not at all. Nothing.
The werewolf.
Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Liz is all business tonight.
I know. I haven't had dinner yet.
Oh, okay. I
Uh,
don't do that much either, so I'm just enjoying myself. Liz, please make a motion if you'd like.
I would be happy to. I move to appoint 2 interim trustees for the Brooks Memorial Library Board of Trustees as follows. Karen Tyler for a 3-year term and Gabriel Sestare, did I say it right? For the final year of an unexpired term.
Great. Thank you. Liz has made a motion to appoint 2 interim trustees for the Brooks Memorial Library Board of Trustees. Karen Tyler for a 3-year term and Gabriel Sestare for the final year of an unexpired term. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And none opposed. That's 5-0 for Jan, who's keeping track. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
yeah, Jan.
Bye,
Thank you,
Star.
Star.
Bye, Star.
Hi, Star.
I like how Star is just one name, you know.
Like Prince
That's right.
Or Cher.
or Brandy.
Madonna.
Or Brandy, yeah.
Oh, Brandy, yeah.
I thought about adding my last name and then I didn't.
So we can see.
Well,
Know by now.
I think we're getting this down. How does everybody else feel?
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't have an agenda item for personal feelings, but I think we're done with. Thanks for everybody for watching. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Brandy has made a motion to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Thank
Good
you,
night.
Peter, Patrick,
Bye, friends.
Dan, everybody, BCTV. Bye, Brattleboro.
Brattleboro.